You're standing in a hardware store in rural Pennsylvania, Tuesday morning. Three other people in the aisles. You're buying fertilizer, ammonium nitrate, the kind farmers use. You grab two 50-pound bags. Then you walk over to automotive and pick up a diesel fuel container, the 5-gallon kind. And because you're rebuilding an old engine in your garage, you add a small container of aluminum powder to your cart. 3 items, all sold legally, openly, right there on the shelf. You pay cash, you drive home, you unload your truck and get to work on that engine. 48 hours later, 2 men in dark suits are standing on your porch. They show you federal credentials. We'd like to ask you some questions about your recent purchases. You don't understand. What purchases? They list them back to you, item by item, timestamp by timestamp. They know what you bought, when you bought it, how much you paid. They ask, why this combination? Are you part of any groups? Do you harbor anti-government sentiments? Every answer you give goes into a file with your name on it. A file that didn't exist 3 days ago. A file that will follow you now. Here's what happened. Those 3 items together, fertilizer, diesel, aluminum powder, matched a pattern in a Fusion Center database. An algorithm flagged it. Your purchase triggered an automatic investigation. You're not arrested, not charged, but you're on a list now. A watch list. And that list has consequences you won't see until it's too late. The remarkable thing? You broke no law. Everything you bought was legal. But the system decided that the times combination times of those items indicated something. Intent. Preparation. Threat. And here's the part that should terrify you. This isn't about explosives, precursors. That's just one category. There's a broader pattern emerging, and it cuts across every domain of self-sufficiency. Communication devices, medical supplies, food storage, energy independence, protective equipment, wealth preservation. There are 7 categories of survival items that are currently being restricted, banned, tracked, or flagged by federal and state authorities. Some are already illegal to own in certain states. Others require permits you can't get. All of them share one characteristic. They make you less dependent on the system. And that makes you dangerous. This isn't speculation. These are documented regulatory actions. Executive orders, state statutes, federal tracking programs. I'm going to walk you through 7 survival items that are on a government watch list right now, while they're still legal to acquire in most places. Because the window is closing, and if you wait until the bans are universal, you've waited too long. Item number 1 has already been banned in 6 states and restricted in 12 more. The federal government just allocated $50 million to create a national registry tracking everyone who owns one. Night vision and thermal imaging devices. Let's start with the technology that lets you see when no one else can. Night vision image intensification tubes that amplify ambient light from stars and moon into a visible green image. Thermal imaging forward-looking infrared that detects heat signatures through fog, darkness, and light foliage. These devices turn total darkness into a tactical playing field. You can navigate without a flashlight, identify threats at 100 yards, see warm bodies through walls, hunt ethically at night, detect intruders before they detect you. This is the fundamental power shift that authorities cannot tolerate. For all of human history, military and police forces held a monopoly on night operations. They could see you in the dark, you couldn't see them. Night vision changed that equation. When civilians gained access to Gen 2 and Gen 3 image intensification tubes in the 1990 seconds and 2000s, something remarkable happened: tactical parity. Suddenly, anyone with $3,000 could operate with the same visual capability as a SWAT team. That's unacceptable to a government that views citizens as subjects. So they're dismantling access piece by piece. Start with export restrictions. Generation 3 night vision is classified under ITAR, International Traffic in Arms Regulations. It's a defense article. You can own it domestically, but taking it overseas is a federal felony. 10 years in prison. Why? Because if you can export it, so can anyone. And authorities need the precedent established. This technology is a weapon, not a tool. That classification gives them the legal framework to expand restrictions domestically later. Next, state-level bans. California has repeatedly attempted to ban thermal imaging for hunting, using poaching prevention as the pretext. SB 1175 and subsequent bills. New York has proposed requiring permits to own night vision or thermal devices, not to carry them, to own them. The rationale is always the same. Criminals might use them. But FBI crime statistics show night vision is involved in less than 0.01% of violent crimes. This isn't about crime, it's about capability. Then there's the federal tracking infrastructure being built quietly. The ATF is exploring a registration system for night vision and thermal devices modeled on the National Firearms Act. You'd pay a $200 tax stamp, submit fingerprints and photos, undergo a background check, wait 6 to 12 months for approval, and enter a permanent federal registry. Every device you own, tracked. Every transfer, recorded. And once that registry exists, confiscation becomes trivial. They know who has what, they know where you live. Manufacturers are being pressured from the other direction. Military contracts explicitly threaten to pull business if companies sell Generation 3 tubes to civilians. So firms like L3, Harris, and Elbit Systems self-restrict. They'll sell you Gen 2 or digital night vision inferior technology with grainy images and limited range. But Gen 3, with its crisp resolution and extreme low-light performance, that's for the military only. The civilian market gets the scraps, and even those scraps are being eyed for elimination. Why are they doing this? Because night vision creates asymmetry that favors the outnumbered and the defensive. Every insurgency in modern history has understood this principle. Own the night, and you own the war. The Viet Cong, the Mujahideen, Iraqi insurgents, they operated at night because coalition forces, despite their technology, couldn't be everywhere at once. Night vision in civilian hands replicates that dynamic domestically. A government attempting to enforce curfews, conduct raids, or suppress resistance faces an enormous problem if the population can see in the dark. You can't intimidate people who watch you coming from 200 yards away. There's also the surveillance counter capability. Thermal imaging can detect hidden watchers. That camera in the bushes, it has a heat signature from its electronics. That unmarked van parked down the street, the occupant's body heat is visible through the thin metal. A population equipped with thermal imaging becomes much harder to surveil covertly, and covert surveillance is the backbone of modern social control. Take that away, and the whole apparatus becomes vulnerable. Here's your kill mechanism if you don't have this capability. The grid goes down. Rule of law collapses. You're defending your homestead at night. A group approaches, under cover of darkness raiders, desperate neighbors, opportunistic criminals. You have a flashlight. When you turn it on, you give away your exact position. The beam blinds you to everything beyond its narrow cone. You're a stationary target outlined in light. They have night vision. They see you clearly, a glowing figure in green phosphor. They see your weapon. They see your cover. They see the layout of your property. You see nothing. The fight is over before it starts, because you're operating blind while they have perfect vision. You lose not because you lacked courage or firepower, but because you lacked sight. So how do you acquire this capability while it's still legal? Right now, in most states, there are no federal restrictions on purchasing night vision or thermal devices. No registration, no background check. You walk into a tactical shop or order online, and it ships to your door. But that window is narrowing. If your budget allows, prioritize Generation 3 night vision. A PVS 14 monocular is the gold standard $3,000 to $5,000. It's helmet mountable, weapon mountable, and handheld. You can use it for navigation, security, and hunting. The image is crystal clear, even under starlight. If Gen 3 is out of reach financially, Gen 2 Plus systems run $800 to $1,500. The image is grainier, the range is shorter, but it's infinitely better than nothing. For thermal, start with a handheld monocular. FLIR Scout Series units run $600 to $1,200. They let you scan an area, detect heat signatures, and identify threats behind concealment. If you hunt or expect to defend static positions, consider a rifle-mounted thermal optic. Premium units from Pulsar or Trigicon cost $2,000 to $5,000, but they let you identify and engage targets in total darkness with precision. Purchase considerations matter. Paying with a card creates a permanent record in the retailer's database, which can be subpoenaed or voluntarily shared with law enforcement. Cash transactions leave no trail. Private sales person to person are legal in most states and generate no paperwork. If you're concerned about privacy, those are your roots. But ownership is only the first step. Night vision and thermal require training. Depth perception disappears with a monocular, you're viewing a flat image. Navigating rough terrain takes practice. Target identification at distance requires familiarity with how heat signatures and image intensification render objects. Get the device, then use it, repeatedly. until it's intuitive. Because in a crisis, fumbling with unfamiliar equipment gets you killed. And for God's sake, maintain operational security. Don't post pictures of your night vision on social media. Don't tell casual acquaintances you own it. The fewer people who know, the lower your profile. Low profile means you're not a target for confiscation if when the restrictions expand. They don't want you to see in the dark. Because people who can see in the dark can't be easily controlled. And control is the point of every restriction you're about to hear. Body armor, level IA, I, and IV plates. Let's talk about the technology that makes you harder to kill. Body armor. Specifically, hard rifle plates level 3, level 3 plus, and level 4 ceramic or polyethylene panels that stop rifle rounds. Not soft Kevlar vests that stop handguns. We're talking about the plates that stop 308 Winchester, 7.62x 51 NATO, 30-06 armor-piercing rounds. The armor that makes you survivable in a gunfight. Here's the simple equation that terrifies authorities. Body armor means you're harder to kill. Harder to kill means you're harder to control by force. And modern governance, when you strip away the polite fiction, rests on a monopoly of force. The state's ability to enforce compliance depends on the credible threat of violence. Police, military, federal agents, they all carry firearms because the implicit message is comply or face lethal consequences. Body armor disrupts that dynamic. It means the state must escalate beyond center mass rifle fire to stop you. Headshots, explosives, negotiation. And negotiation implies you have agency, which is philosophically unacceptable to authoritarian systems. So they're banning it. Not everywhere yet, but the pattern is accelerating. New York banned civilian purchase and possession of body armor in 2022, following the Buffalo supermarket shooting. The shooter wore body armor, so the legislature responded by criminalizing armor for everyone. Never mind that the armor didn't cause the shooting. Never mind that law-abiding citizens use armor for self-defense, competitive shooting, and active shooter preparedness. The logic was, criminals use it, so civilians can't have it. If you're in New York and you own body armor today, you're required to surrender it or remove it from the state. Existing owners were not grandfathered. The law is retroactive. Connecticut took a different approach. They banned online sales. You can only purchase body armor through face-to-face transactions. This makes acquisition significantly harder, especially in rural areas where no local retailers exist. It's a soft ban, legal in theory, inaccessible in practice. California has seen multiple legislative attempts to ban civilian body armor, Assembly Bill 92 and others. So far, they've failed, but the bills keep coming back. The strategy is attrition. Introduce the bill every session until public attention is elsewhere and it passes quietly. At the federal level, there's the Protect America's Law Enforcement Act, introduced in various forms over the past several years. It would criminalize body armor purchased by civilians, with narrow exceptions for military and police. The rationale is always the same. Criminals use body armor. The FBI's own statistics contradict this. Less than 1% of violent crimes involve body armor. But facts don't matter when the goal is disarmament by proxy. Because here's what's really happening. Direct gun bans face constitutional obstacles. The Second Amendment, even in its neutered modern interpretation, protects firearms ownership. Body armor isn't covered. So if you can't ban the gun, ban the armor. Make the gun less useful. If a citizen knows that being armed still leaves them vulnerable to being easily killed, they're less likely to resist when force is applied. There's also the manufacturer pressure campaign. Companies that produce body armor for military and police contracts are being told, implicitly and explicitly, sell to civilians and lose the government contracts. So major manufacturers self-restrict. They'll sell soft armor to civilians, but hard plates, those are law enforcement and military only. The civilian market gets leftovers from smaller manufacturers, and even that market is being legislated out of existence state by state. Let's run the kill mechanism scenario. Post-collapse, your home is targeted by an armed group. Could be a roving gang. Could be desperate neighbors who've decided your supplies are now theirs. Could be former law enforcement operating without legal authority. They're armed. You're armed. An exchange of fire occurs. You take a center mass hit from a rifle. Without armor, that's a sucking chest wound. You've got minutes before you bleed out internally. Your family is now defenseless because you're incapacitated or dead. The attackers, wearing armor, take hits but stay in the fight. Bruised ribs, sure, but alive. Functional. They win because they absorbed bullets you couldn't. One piece of equipment determined the outcome. So how do you get body armor while it's still legal where you live? First, check your state and local laws. If you're in New York, it's already banned. If you're in California, watch the legislative calendar. Everywhere else, for now, it's legal for non-felons to purchase and own. Prioritize level 4 plates. These stop 30 to 06 armor-piercing rounds, which means they'll stop virtually any rifle round you're likely to encounter. Front and back plates are the minimum. Side plates are optional but recommended. They protect your liver, which is a catastrophic bleed if hit. Material choice matters. Ceramic plates are lightweight, 5 to 7 pounds per plate, and they're multi-curve, meaning they conform to your body for comfort. Steel plates are cheaper but heavier, 8 to 10 pounds per plate, and they have a spalling problem. When a bullet hits steel, fragments spray outward and can injure your face or neck. If you go steel, make sure it has an anti-spalling coating. Polyethylene is the lightest option, but also the most expensive. Get a plate carrier that fits your plate size. 10 by 12 is the most common. The carrier should be adjustable, with MOLLE webbing so you can attach pouches for magazines, medical supplies, and other gear. Make sure it has quick-release mechanisms. If you're injured and someone needs to access your torso for medical treatment, they need to get that carrier off fast. Sizing is critical. Plates must cover your heart, lungs, and liver. Too large, and you can't move. Too small, and there are gaps where you're vulnerable. Try on a carrier with plates before you commit to a purchase. Move around. Go prone. Stand up quickly. Make sure it doesn't restrict your mobility to the point where you're a slow, armored target. Purchase strategies. Buy now. Prices are stable today, but if federal bans gain traction, prices will skyrocket and availability will vanish. Pay cash or use cryptocurrency if you're concerned about creating a purchase record. Private person-to-person sales are legal in most states and generate no paperwork. If you live in a restrictive state, consider purchasing armor while traveling out of state, but understand that transporting it back may violate state law. Training is non-negotiable. Wearing 15 to 20 pounds on your torso changes everything. Your center of gravity shifts, you fatigue faster. Going prone and getting back up is harder. Practice shooting, moving, and transitioning between positions while wearing your armor. Otherwise, you're just carrying extra weight that makes you a slower target. They want you soft. Soft targets don't shoot back for long. They go down with the first hit, and the fight ends on the state's terms. Armor extends your survivability, which extends your capacity to resist. That's why it's being banned. Not because criminals use it, but because times might. Antibiotics and prescription medications. Now, we're going to talk about the regulatory destruction of your medical autonomy. Specifically, access to antibiotics without a prescription. For decades, preppers and homesteaders kept a dirty little secret. Veterinary antibiotics. Fish antibiotics. Livestock antibiotics. Same active ingredients as human antibiotics. Amoxicillin, doxycycline, ciprofloxacin, cephalexin. Sold over the counter at farm supply stores and online retailers. No prescription. No doctor visit. No insurance. Just walk in, buy a bottle, and store it for emergencies. That capability has been systematically eliminated. In 2023, the FDA finalized a rule expanding the Veterinary Feed Directive to cover all medically important antibiotics. What this means in practice: antibiotics that were previously sold over the counter for fish, birds, and livestock now require a veterinary prescription. Amoxicillin, prescription. Penicillin, prescription. Doxycycline, ciprofloxacin, cephalexin, all prescription only. Major retailers like Chewy, Amazon, and Tractor Supply stopped selling them to the public. Smaller online sources either shut down or now require you to upload a prescription from a licensed veterinarian. The official rationale is antibiotic resistance. The claim is that improper veterinary use contributes to resistant bacterial strains that threaten public health. But here's the inconvenient truth. There's no data showing that preppers stockpiling fish antibiotics for personal emergency use contributed meaningfully to antibiotic resistance. The real drivers of resistance are agricultural overuse, in factory farming, and overprescription by doctors in clinical settings, but those are politically untouchable industries. So, instead, the FDA targeted the smallest, most vulnerable group, individuals seeking medical autonomy. What this rule accomplished is the closure of the last accessible path to emergency antibiotics for people who don't have reliable access to healthcare. Rural populations, uninsured populations, people who distrust the medical establishment. preppers planning for grid-down scenarios where hospitals don't exist. All of these groups just lost their backup option. Why does this matter? Because bacterial infections are the #1 post-injury killer in collapse scenarios. You get a cut, a puncture wound, an abrasion. It seems minor. Day 2. You notice red streaking up your arm, that's lymphangitis, the infection spreading through your lymphatic system. Day 3. You develop a fever and confusion, that's septicemia, bacteria in your bloodstream. Day 4. Your organs start failing. You die in agony from a treatable infection, killed not by the wound but by the absence of a simple antibiotic. In a functioning society, you go to a doctor, you get a prescription, you go to a pharmacy. You take amoxicillin 500 milligrams 3 times a day for 7 to 10 days, and the infection clears. But we're talking about scenarios where that infrastructure doesn't exist. Grid down, supply chains collapsed, hospitals overwhelmed or shuttered, pharmacies looted or inaccessible. In that context, a stockpile of antibiotics is the difference between life and death, and the government just made that stockpile illegal to acquire. The control mechanism here is medical dependence. A population that can treat its own infections is a population that doesn't need doctors, clinics, or government healthcare systems. It's ungovernable in a specific, visceral way. You can't withhold medical care as leverage if the population doesn't need your care. You can't deny treatment to dissidents, undesirables, or non-compliant citizens if they're treating themselves. Medical gatekeeping is a powerful control tool, and antibiotics were the escape hatch. Now that hatch is being welded shut. There's also the pharmaceutical monopoly protection angle. Veterinary antibiotics were cheap, $20 to $40 for a full treatment course. Human antibiotics, prescribed through a doctor and filled at a pharmacy, cost $150 to $300 with insurance, $500 or more without. Over-the-counter veterinary access was competition. It drove down effective costs and made people less dependent on the medical industrial complex. That industry lobbied hard for this rule, and they won. Here's your kill mechanism. Grid goes down. You sustain an injury, let's say a deep laceration from broken glass while securing your home. You clean it, you bandage it, it looks okay. 2 days later, the wound is hot to the touch, red, swollen. You don't have antibiotics. You can't get to a doctor because there are no doctors available. The infection progresses, fever spikes, you become delirious, your body goes into septic shock. You die from a wound that required $15 worth of amoxicillin to treat. Your family watches you die slowly, knowing that a simple pill could have saved you, but that pill is illegal for you to have without permission from an authority that no longer exists. So what can you do? The legal landscape is grim, but there are still options, some legitimate and some in grey areas. Topical antibiotics remain available over the counter. Triple antibiotic ointment, Neosporin, and its generics can prevent infections in minor wounds. Silver sulfadiazine cream, available in some states without a prescription, is used for burn wound infections. These won't treat systemic infections, but they reduce the likelihood of wounds becoming infected in the first place. Fish antibiotics still exist in a legal grey area. Some small suppliers still sell them, but the quality is now uncertain because there's no FDA oversight. They're expensive, $60 to $100 for a single course, and there's risk. You're buying from sources that may not be reliable, and you have no recourse if the product is counterfeit or contaminated. Prescription stockpiling is technically legal but requires access to a doctor. If you have a legitimate medical need, get a prescription and don't use all of it. Save the extras. Dental infections are common, and dentists often prescribe amoxicillin or clindamycin. If you need a root canal, get the prescription filled and save any leftover antibiotics. This is legal. You're allowed to possess and use medications prescribed to you. Storing them for later is not illegal. International pharmacies are a risky option. Canadian and Mexican pharmacies will mail order antibiotics without a prescription. The FDA officially says this is illegal, but prosecution for personal use quantities is rare. The real risk is customs seizure. If your package is intercepted, you lose the money and the medication, and you have no recourse. Then there are alternative strategies that aren't as effective as antibiotics, but are better than nothing. Medical-grade Manuka honey has genuine antibacterial properties and can be used as a wound dressing to prevent infection. Colloidal silver is controversial and not FDA approved, but it's been used historically as a topical antimicrobial. Garlic extract contains allicin, which has antibacterial effects. Herbal alternatives like golden seal, Oregon grapefruit, and echinacea have been used in traditional medicine. though their efficacy doesn't match pharmaceutical antibiotics. The most important thing you can stockpile is knowledge. Get books, asterisk, the Survival Medicine Handbook, asterisk, where there is no doctor, asterisk. Learn how to recognize infections early, understand dosing charts, know which antibiotics treat which bacteria. Print these resources, because digital files are useless without power. Sepsis doesn't care about your prescription, but the government does. They've decided that your ability to treat a bacterial infection without their permission is too dangerous to allow. Draw your own conclusions about what that says about their priorities. High-capacity fuel storage. Energy independence is being quietly criminalized through a maze of fire codes, zoning restrictions, and quantity limits that make bulk fuel storage illegal or functionally impossible. We're talking about gasoline, diesel, and propane stored in quantities sufficient to actually matter enough to run a generator for months. Power vehicles when gas stations are empty, heat your home through a winter, cook food long-term. Not 5-gallon jerry cans, real storage, 50 gallons, 100 gallons, 500 gallons, the amounts that provide genuine energy autonomy. Every jurisdiction has different limits, and most people don't know they're violating the law until a fire marshal shows up or a neighbor reports them. Many cities limit residential gasoline storage to 25 gallons total. Some allow up to 60 gallons if you use approved containers. A few permit 100 gallons with specific setback distances from buildings. But 500 gallons? 1,000 gallons? That triggers commercial storage regulations, permits, inspections, fire suppression systems, secondary containment berms requirements that are either prohibitively expensive or physically impossible on a residential property. Diesel is slightly less restricted because it's less volatile than gasoline, but even diesel faces bulk storage thresholds. Over 1,000 gallons, you're looking at EPA reporting requirements, underground storage tank regulations if it's buried, and potential liability insurance mandates. Propane over 1,000 gallons requires professional installation and periodic inspections. Many suburban areas ban propane tanks over 500 gallons outright. Then there's the container problem. You can't just pour gasoline into any container. It has to be an approved container, OSHA, DOT, or NFPA certified. 55-gallon drums? Not approved for gasoline. Plastic totes? Not approved. Portable containers over 5 gallons need flame arresters and spill-proof spouts. Violating these standards can result in fines, forced removal of the fuel, and in some cases, criminal charges. Storage location requirements add another layer of impossibility. Fuel must be stored a certain distance from buildings, property lines, and ignition sources. It needs ventilation. Enclosed spaces are illegal for gasoline storage. Large quantities require secondary containment so that if the container leaks, the fuel doesn't contaminate groundwater. For most residential properties, there's literally no place on the lot where you can legally store significant fuel quantities and meet all these requirements simultaneously. And if you manage to navigate all of that, there's the tracking problem. After September 11th, large fuel purchases became a terrorism red flag. Fertilizer and fuel were the components of the Oklahoma City bombing. So now, if you're filling multiple jerry cans at a gas station repeatedly, that pattern can be flagged in terrorism databases. Buy diesel and ammonium nitrate in the same trip, you might get a visit. The rationale is preventing vehicle bombs. The effect is chilling citizens' ability to store energy for emergencies. Why is the government doing this? Because fuel is freedom. Fuel is mobility. A population with fuel can leave. You can't enforce quarantines, lockdowns, curfews, or movement restrictions if citizens can drive wherever they want for as long as they want. Empty gas tanks create a captive population. You're stuck in place, dependent on whatever local authority controls the remaining fuel distribution. Fuel is also energy independence. When the power grid goes down, a generator keeps your home livable, but only if you have fuel. The government's leverage in a grid-down scenario is this: comply with our orders and we'll restore power to your area. Refuse and you sit in the dark. If you have a generator and 1,000 gallons of fuel, you're immune to that threat. You don't need their power. You're ungovernable. There's also the tax revenue angle. Fuel is one of the most heavily taxed commodities: federal excise tax, state tax, local tax. When you buy fuel and store it long-term, you're buying it at today's price, locking in today's tax rate. If taxes increase or fuel prices spike due to policy decisions, you've insulated yourself. The government loses future revenue from your reduced consumption. Here's your kill mechanism. The power grid fails. Cyber attack, EMP, cascading infrastructure collapse, doesn't matter. You have a generator. You planned ahead. But you only have 20 gallons of gasoline because that's all your local ordinance allowed. At full load, a typical home generator burns through a gallon an hour. You've got 20 hours of power, then it's over. Gas stations are closed, they need power to pump fuel. Or they're empty because panic buying cleared them out in the first 6 hours of the crisis. It's January. Outside temperature is 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Your house loses heat. Pipes freeze and burst. Your family faces hypothermia. You have the equipment to survive, but you don't have the fuel. The generator sits silent. And people freeze to death because fuel storage regulations decided that your survival was less important than theoretical fire risk. So how do you store fuel within legal limits or slightly outside them if you're willing to accept the risk? First, know your local rules. Check city fire codes, county ordinances, HOA regulations if applicable. Find out what the actual limits are. Then decide whether you're going to comply fully, comply partially, or quietly exceed them and keep a low profile. If you're staying legal, maximize what you're allowed. If the limit is 25 gallons of gasoline, store 25 gallons in approved containers. 5-gallon NATO-style jerry cans made by Wavian or Scepter are high quality and legal. Buy 5 of them. Store them in a detached shed if possible, away from ignition sources. Add fuel stabilizer PRIG or Star Bill, which extends gasoline's shelf life from 6 months to 2 or 3 years. Rotate your stock. Use the oldest fuel first. Refill with fresh. This keeps your supply from degrading. Diesel lasts longer than gasoline, 1 to 2 years, and benefits from stabilizers and biocides. If your generator or vehicle runs on diesel, prioritize diesel storage. It's safer to store and less regulated in many areas. Propane is the best option for long-term storage because it doesn't degrade, ever. A 100-pound propane tank sitting in your yard for 20 years will work perfectly when you need it. Propane is also safer than gasoline. It doesn't produce flammable vapors at normal temperatures. Many jurisdictions allow 100 to 250-gallon propane tanks where they ban equivalent gasoline storage. Get a tri-fuel or dual-fuel generator that runs on propane, gasoline, and natural gas. This gives you flexibility. If you want to store more than your local laws allow, the key is operational security. Don't advertise. Camouflage tanks with paint or landscaping. Store containers out of sight from the street and neighbors. No social media posts showing off your fuel bunker. The fewer people who know, the less likely you are to be reported. Consider alternative energy to reduce your fuel dependency. Solar panels with battery storage can power essential loads, refrigerator, lights, communication devices without burning fuel. Wood heat is renewable and unregulated in most areas. Passive solar design reduces heating and cooling needs. These aren't replacements for fuel storage, but they extend how long your fuel lasts. They don't want you to store energy, because energy is freedom, and freedom is dangerous to systems built on control, drone jammers, and signal disruption devices. This one's simple. It's already illegal, completely. Federally, no exceptions. We're talking about devices that jam or disrupt radio signals. Drone jammers that block the control frequencies between a drone and its operator. GPS jammers that prevent navigation. Cell phone jammers that block communications. All of them are banned under the Communications Act of 1934, Section 333, which makes it illegal to willfully or maliciously interfere with radio communications. The FCC enforces this with fines up to $112,500 per violation, and criminal prosecution is possible. Why am I including something that's already banned? Because you need to understand what you're not allowed to have and why they banned it. Because the logic behind this total prohibition reveals everything about the surveillance state's priorities. Drone jammers block the radio frequencies drones use to communicate with their controllers, usually 2.4 GHz or 5.8 GHz. When you activate a jammer, the drone loses its control signal. Depending on its programming, it either hovers in place, returns to its launch point, or lands immediately. GPS jammers block the satellite signals drones use for autonomous navigation. Cell jammers block cellular communication. All of these technologies give you the ability to create a bubble of electromagnetic silence around your location. No drones, no tracking, no remote observation. This capability is critical in a post-collapse environment where drones become reconnaissance tools. Criminal organizations already use drones to scout properties, survey security, drop contraband. Cartels on the southern border use drones to monitor border patrol movements. In a collapse scenario, drones will be used by raiders, gangs, and hostile groups to surveil targets before attacking. A quadcopter with a thermal camera can fly over your property at 200 feet, identify how many people you have, where they sleep, where your defensive positions are, what your weak points are, and you can't stop it. Shooting at it reveals your position, wastes ammunition, and might not even hit. A jammer stops it instantly, silently, without giving away your location. But you're not allowed to have one, because the government uses drones for surveillance. Police departments have drones. Federal agencies have drones. Border Patrol has drones. The entire surveillance apparatus is increasingly dependent on aerial reconnaissance, and they cannot allow civilians to have the ability to create dead zones. If you can shut down drones over your property, you've created a hole in the surveillance grid. That's unacceptable. Cell phone jammers are banned for the same reason. Cellular networks provide real-time location tracking, metadata collection, and content surveillance. Every phone is a tracking device. Jammers create areas where phones stop working, where the network can't track you. The government's official reason for banning jammers is that they interfere with emergency services someone might need to call 911. The real reason is that they interfere with mass surveillance. The FAA justifies the drone jammer ban by claiming that drones are aircraft and jamming them endangers aviation. This is absurd on its face. A hobbyist quadcopter is not a passenger airliner, but the legal fiction is maintained because it gives the FAA authority to prosecute anyone who interferes with drones, even drones illegally surveilling private property. Enforcement is real. The FCC has prosecuted people for using cell phone jammers in prisons to block contraband phones. They've gone after businesses that use jammers to stop employees from using phones during work hours. They've seized equipment from individuals who ordered jammers from overseas. Even possessing a jammer is treated as evidence of intent to violate federal law. Here's your kill mechanism. Post-collapse, a hostile group is scouting your area. They launch a drone, a DJI Mavic or similar consumer quadcopter. It flies over your property at 200 feet. It has a thermal camera. It identifies how many people you have, what weapons you're carrying, where you've set up defensive positions, where your supplies are stored. You have no way to stop it. Shooting reveals your position and might miss. The drone returns to its operators with complete intelligence. They come back with overwhelming force, hitting the exact weak points they identified. Your defenses are breached. Your family is overrun. Because you couldn't blind the eye in the sky, you can't acquire a jammer legally. Domestic sales don't exist because they're illegal. Ordering from international suppliers results in customs seizure. Building one yourself is possible if you have RF engineering knowledge, but operating it is a federal crime. So what I'm giving you isn't acquisition advice, it's context. Understanding how jammers work and why they're banned tells you something about the control structure you live under. There are legal alternatives, but they're pathetically limited. Net guns fire a projectile that deploys a net to capture drones. They work, but only at close range 30 to 50 feet, and they cost $1,500 or more. Trained falcons can attack drones. This is legal, but expensive, requires expertise, and is inconsistent. These aren't real solutions. They're fig leaves so authorities can claim you have options while denying you the tools that actually work. Passive defenses are your only realistic path. Visual and thermal camouflage reduce the chance of detection. Staying under cover trees. Buildings blocks aerial observation. Light discipline at night prevents visible signatures. RF detectors can alert you when a drone is nearby by detecting its control signal. These detectors are legal and cost $200 to $500. They can't stop the drone, but they give you warning to take cover or cease activity. The philosophical point here is simple. They have eyes in the sky. You're not allowed to close them. You're not allowed to create privacy. You're not allowed to block surveillance. The technology to do so exists, is affordable, and is widely available globally. But in the United States, it's a federal crime to possess it. Draw your own conclusions about whether you live in a free society. Bulk food storage. Now we get to something that's still technically legal but increasingly monitored, investigated, and stigmatized. Storing large quantities of food. I'm not talking about an extra week's worth of groceries in your pantry. I'm talking about multi-month or multi-year supplies of shelf-stable food. Bulk grains, 50-pound bags of rice and beans, cases of freeze-dried meals, pallets of MREs, the kind of food storage that means you don't need grocery stores or government rations for a year or more. There's no federal law against food storage. You can buy it, store it, and use it. But purchase patterns are being tracked, and large orders are flagged. Bulk food suppliers, companies like Mountain House, Augustin Farms, Emergency Essentials maintain customer databases. When law enforcement or federal agencies request purchase records, those databases are available. A $5,000 order of freeze-dried food is a red flag. It signals prepper activity. And in the eyes of fusion centers and federal threat assessments, preppers are potential extremists. This isn't paranoia. Leaked Department of Homeland Security and FBI documents from 2009 and 2012 listed bulk food storage as an indicator of extremism, alongside things like political bumper stickers and paying with cash. The rationale is that people who stockpile food expect societal collapse, and people who expect collapse might be anti-government. Therefore, food storage equals potential domestic terrorism. It's insane logic, but it's official policy. Warehouse clubs like Costco and Sam's Club track purchases through membership cards. Their algorithms flag unusual buying patterns, repeated purchases of large quantities of rice, canned goods, or bottled water. This data is accessible to law enforcement via subpoena, and in some cases, it's shared voluntarily under suspicious activity reporting frameworks. You're not doing anything illegal, but you're being watched. There have been reports, anecdotal, but multiple, of people receiving visits from law enforcement after placing large bulk food orders. The visits are framed as welfare checks or community outreach. The questions are always the same. Why do you need so much food? Are you expecting something? Who is this for? Are you part of a group? The goal is intimidation, creating a chilling effect so people self-censor out of fear. Some municipalities have started using zoning restrictions to limit food storage. They classify large quantities of food as commercial inventory and claim it violates residential zoning. HOAs have implemented rules against excessive storage, a deliberately vague term that can mean anything. Fire codes are being twisted to claim that bulk food storage is a fire hazard, though there's no credible evidence that properly stored food poses any fire risk. Why are they monitoring this? Because food dependence is the most fundamental form of control. A hungry population is a compliant population. Follow our orders, or you don't eat, is the oldest control mechanism in human history. Food distribution during crises, natural disasters, wars, economic collapse is the primary way governments maintain authority. You show up at the FEMA distribution site, you register, you get scanned, you get tracked, and you get your rations. If you refuse to comply, you starve. But a population with stored food doesn't need government rations. They can refuse to register, refuse to be tracked, refuse to comply with demands in exchange for food. This makes them ungovernable. It undermines the government's narrative that they're the saviors providing for helpless citizens. Self-sufficient citizens don't need saving, and that's a threat to the entire crisis management control structure. Here's your kill mechanism: supply chains collapse, cyber attack on logistics networks, economic implosion, war. Pick your scenario. Grocery stores are empty within 48 hours. The government announces food distribution sites run by FEMA or the National Guard. To access food, you must register. You must submit to biometric identification. You must accept health screenings or vaccinations. You must agree to relocation to a safe zone if ordered. You have no choice because you're starving. Your children are starving. You comply. You surrender your autonomy, your freedom, your privacy, because you need calories. And every bit of leverage the authorities have over you stems from the fact that you didn't store food when you had the chance. So how do you store food discreetly? First, distributed purchasing. Don't place one massive order from a single supplier. Spread your purchases across multiple companies. Use different names and addresses if you have trusted family or friends who will allow it. Build your stockpile over time. An extra 10 pounds of rice per shopping trip goes unnoticed. A £500 bulk order gets attention. Local sourcing helps. Cash purchases at grocery stores leave no digital trail. Restaurant supply stores sell bulk rice, beans, and flour with no tracking. Farm co-ops sell grain in 50-pound bags, no questions asked. Buying a little extra every time you shop 2 extra cans of vegetables. An extra bag of beans accumulates into a significant stockpile over a year without triggering any alarms. Focus on bulk staples. White rice has a 20-year shelf life if stored properly. Dried beans last just as long. Wheat berries, whole wheat kernels last decades and can be ground into flour with a hand mill. Rolled oats last 10 plus years. Salt and sugar last indefinitely. Honey lasts forever. Coconut oil has a long shelf life. These are the foundation of caloric security. Storage method matters. Food-grade 5-gallon buckets with gamma seal lids are ideal. Inside the bucket, Use mylar bags and oxygen absorbers. This combination keeps out moisture, oxygen, and pests. Store buckets in a cool, dry, dark location. Heat and light degrade food. Label everything with contents and date so you can rotate stock. Calculate your needs realistically. An adult needs roughly 2,000 calories per day, which is 730,000 calories per year. 1 pound of rice provides about 1,600 calories. 1 pound of beans provides about 1,500 calories. So, for one person for 1 year, you need approximately 500 pounds of combined rice and beans as a bare minimum. Supplement with fats, vitamins, and variety. But that's your baseline. Operational security is critical. Don't tell neighbors about your food storage. Don't post photos of your prepper pantry on social media. The fewer people who know, the lower the risk of theft or reporting. Rotate your stock, use the oldest food first. Replace it with fresh so your purchasing looks like normal grocery shopping rather than hoarding. They're watching who doesn't need them, because independence is the ultimate rebellion. When the crisis comes and they're handing out rations, the people who don't show up are the people who don't comply. And they want to know who those people are before the crisis happens. Precious metals, gold and silver. The final item on the list is the one with the longest and darkest historical precedent. Precious metals, gold and silver. The ultimate store of value outside government-controlled currency. The crisis hedge that's worked for 5,000 years. And the one thing the government has already confiscated once in American history. Precious metals represent wealth that can't be printed, devalued by decree, inflated away, or seized electronically. Gold and silver hold value across regime changes, currency collapses, and economic catastrophes. They're compact, portable, and universally recognized. 1 ounce of gold is worth over $2,000. You can carry $50,000 worth of gold in your pocket. Try doing that with canned food or ammunition. This makes metals dangerous to monetary authority. Governments control populations through control of currency. They print money, they set interest rates, they manipulate inflation, they freeze bank accounts. Precious metals bypass all of that. If the population holds significant wealth in metals, the government's monetary controls become less effective. People can trade using metal when paper currency is worthless. They can preserve wealth when savings are inflated into nothing. This is unacceptable to a system that depends on monetary control. So metals are being tracked. When you purchase precious metals, if you pay more than $10,000 in cash in a single transaction or in related transactions, the dealer is required to file IRS Form 8300. This form includes your name, social security number, address, and the amount of the purchase. It goes into a federal database. The IRS now knows you own precious metals. If you try to avoid this by structuring your purchases, buying $9,000 worth today and another $9,000 tomorrow to stay under the $10,000 threshold, you've just committed a federal crime. Structuring is illegal under anti-money laundering laws. The penalty is asset forfeiture, fines, and potential prison time. They want you to cross the reporting threshold. Dealers also keep records of all sales, even those under the reporting limit. These records are subject to subpoena. When you sell precious metals at a profit, dealers issue IRS Form 1099-B for certain transactions, reporting your capital gains. So even if the government doesn't know you bought metals, they find out when you sell them. And they can extrapolate. If you sold 10 ounces of gold, you probably own more. Some coin shops cooperate with federal agencies beyond legal requirements. Large cash transactions get informally reported to local police as suspicious activity. Frequent buyers are noted. If you're buying gold regularly, you're on someone's radar. But the real nightmare scenario is confiscation. And it's not hypothetical, it already happened. Executive Order 6102, issued by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933, ordered all U.S. citizens to surrender their gold coins, gold bars, and gold certificates to the Federal Reserve. You were compensated at the rate of $20.67 per troy ounce in paper money. Immediately after the confiscation was complete, the government revalued gold to $35 per ounce. Citizens who complied lost 40% of their purchasing power overnight. Those who didn't comply faced a $10,000 fine and 10 years in federal prison. The legal mechanism was the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, repurposed to declare a national emergency during the Great Depression. The precedent was established. In a severe crisis, the government can and will confiscate precious metals. There were exemptions, rare coins with numismatic value. Small amounts for industrial use, gold held outside the United States, but ordinary citizens with common gold coins were stripped of their wealth. Could it happen again? Legally, yes. The precedent exists. In a modern crisis, hyperinflation, economic collapse, war, widespread civil unrest, an executive order could mandate metal confiscation. And today's tracking infrastructure makes enforcement easier. Digital purchase records, dealer databases, 1099B forms, and Fusion Center data analysis mean the government knows who owns what. They can prioritize enforcement, target high-value holders, and use law enforcement to conduct searches and seizures. Here's why they do it. Metals compete with government-controlled currency. In a collapse scenario where paper money is worthless, the government will push a replacement, most likely a central bank digital currency, fully tracked and controlled. For that system to work, alternative currencies must be eliminated. Precious metals are the primary alternative. Confiscation removes the escape hatch. There's also the wealth confiscation angle. In a fiscal crisis, governments need assets. Metals are tangible wealth. Seizing them under the pretext of national emergency or economic stabilization provides immediate resources for the state. So how do you acquire metals with minimal tracking? First, stay under the $10,000 cash reporting threshold per transaction. Spread purchases across multiple dealers over time. This keeps you off the Form 8300 radar. Use cash, not credit cards or bank transfers, to avoid creating financial records that say precious metals purchase. Private person-to-person sales are legal in most states and generate no paperwork, no reporting requirement, cash transaction, no record. The risk is authenticity. You need to verify that what you're buying is real gold or silver, not plated counterfeits. Use a precious metals testing kit or electronic metal verifier. Meet in safe public locations. Consider the difference between bullion and numismatic coins. Bullion is pure investment, American eagles, Canadian maples, generic rounds and bars. These are tracked more closely and were the primary target of the 1933 confiscation. Numismatic or semi-numismatic coins, those with collectible value beyond their metal content, were historically exempt. Pre-1933 U.S. gold coins, for example. Junk silver, pre-1965 U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars, which are 90% silver. These carry a slightly higher premium, but they're more defensible legally if confiscation is attempted again. Diversify between gold and silver. Gold is for wealth, concentration, easy to hide, easy to transport. Silver is functional for smaller transactions. You can't buy a loaf of bread with a 1-ounce gold coin worth $2,000, but you can with a silver dime worth $3. Silver is bulkier, heavier, harder to move in large quantities, but it's practical for day-to-day barter. Storage. Not in a bank safe deposit box. In a crisis, governments can seal banks and search boxes. This happened in 1933. Home safes or hidden locations are better. Tell no one. Metals are a theft target if people know you have them, and they're a confiscation target if authorities know you have them. Buy outside the banking system whenever possible. Cash transactions don't appear on bank statements. They don't flag algorithms looking for precious metals purchases. They leave no trail. They took it before. Executive Order 6102 is historical fact, not conspiracy theory. They're tracking it now. Every purchase over $10,000. Every sale generating a 1099B. Every dealer database accessible by subpoena. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. And the rhyme scheme includes confiscation when the state decides it needs your wealth more than you do. The pattern. Independence is the crime. Let's step back and look at what these 7 items have in common. Night vision lets you see when others can't. Body armor keeps you alive when others would die. Antibiotics let you heal without doctors. Fuel gives you energy and mobility without the grid. Drone jammers give you privacy against surveillance. Food lets you eat without rations. Metals let you store wealth outside the banking system. Every single one of these items enables independence from a system, and every single one is being restricted, tracked, banned, or has already been banned. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. And the pattern reveals the underlying logic of modern governance. Dependence equals leverage. Leverage equals control, and therefore self-sufficiency must be eliminated. The control equation is simple. If you depend on the system for security, you comply with the system's security demands. If you depend on the system for medical care, you comply with the system's medical mandates. If you depend on the system for energy, you comply with the system's energy rationing. If you depend on the system for food, you comply or you starve. If you depend on the system's currency, you're trapped inside the system's financial controls. Dependence is leverage, and leverage is control. Self-sufficiency breaks this equation. If you can see in the dark, you don't need state protection at night. If you can survive gunfire, you don't need state-approved security. If you can treat infections, you don't need state-approved healthcare. If you have energy, you don't need the state's grid. If you have food, you don't need the state's rations. If you have wealth outside the system, you don't need the state's currency. Self-sufficiency means loss of leverage, which means loss of control, and that is the threat. There's a regulatory progression that applies to every capability the state wants to eliminate. Stage 1. Track it. Know who has it. Build databases, require reporting, monitor purchases. Stage 2. Restrict it, make it harder to get. Licensing, permits, quantity limits. Approve vendors only. Stage 3. Require permission. Can't have it without government approval. Background checks, waiting periods, justification of need. Stage 4. Ban it. Criminalize possession. Confiscate existing items. Stage 5. Enforce the ban. Prosecute violators. Seize assets. Imprison resistors. Where does each of our 7 items sit on this progression? Drone jammers are at stage 4 already banned. Possession is a federal crime. Body armor is at stage 3 to 4 banned in some states, pending federal restrictions. Antibiotics are at stage 3 prescription required. Over-the-counter access eliminated. Night vision is at stage 2 export restricted, tracking infrastructure being built. Fuel storage is at stage 2 to 3 quantity limits enforced. Permits required in some areas. Food storage is at stage 1 to 2 tracked, stigmatized, beginning to face zoning restrictions. Precious metals are at stage 1 to 2 purchases tracked, confiscation precedent established. The progression is accelerating. Pre-September 11th, most of these items were freely available with minimal tracking. From 2001 to 2020, restrictions crept in slowly. Since 2020 pandemic, civil unrest, political polarization, the pace has increased dramatically. What's proposed as legislation today becomes law tomorrow. The regulatory window is closing faster than most people realize. The future they're building is a population that can't see at night, can't stop bullets, can't treat infections, can't move without fuel, can't avoid surveillance, can't eat without permission, and can't store wealth outside the system. This population is 100% dependent and 100% controllable. Every lever of control is in the state's hands. Resistance becomes practically impossible because resistance requires capability, and all capability has been systematically eliminated. The window is closing fast. We're running out of time. The items on this list are still mostly legal to acquire, but the legal landscape is shifting rapidly. Federal bills are pending. State legislatures are introducing new restrictions. Fusion centers are expanding their monitoring. The tracking infrastructure is being built in real time. What you can buy today without consequence might require a permit next year and be completely banned the year after. You need to prioritize based on your situation. Where do you live? Rural areas face different threats than urban. What's your climate? Cold regions make fuel storage critical. What's your threat model? What collapse scenario is most likely where you are? Economic, infrastructure, civil unrest, your answers determine which capabilities you need most urgently. Use a 2-axis prioritization matrix. First axis, urgency: which items are being banned fastest. Body armor and night vision are at the top. Items already banned in some states or with active federal legislation should be acquired immediately if you want them. Second axis, need: which capabilities do you lack most critically? If you can't see at night, night vision is urgent. If you have no medical supplies, antibiotics or alternatives are urgent. The intersection of high urgency and high need is your priority one. The financial reality is harsh. Acquiring all 7 categories of items at a meaningful level costs $8,000 to $15,000. Most people can't spend that at once. The solution is incremental acquisition. 1 category per month. In 7 months, you're equipped. Delay, and some of those categories might be illegal by the time you get to them. During acquisition, operational security matters. Don't create patterns. Vary your vendors, your payment methods, your timing. Spread purchases across different retailers and timeframes. Use different shipping addresses if you have trusted family or friends who'll help. Don't advertise your preparations on social media. No prepper pantry photos. No gear reviews showing your face. Gray man principle, be invisible in plain sight. Low profile means you're not a confiscation target when the bans expand. Stay legal for now. Know your local laws, state, city, county, and HOA regulations. Comply with them to avoid losing everything in a preemptive seizure. But understand that there's a moral question you'll eventually face. If a law criminalizes survival, is that law legitimate? History is full of examples where the legal answer and the moral answer diverged. Harboring escaped slaves was illegal. Hiding Jews from Nazis was illegal. Storing food in Stalin's Soviet Union was illegal. All were morally necessary. You'll have to decide for yourself where that line is. And when you're willing to cross it, you can't do this alone. Community matters. Build trusted networks. Share knowledge, not gear locations. Skill sharing. One person has medical training, another has mechanical skills, another has agricultural knowledge. Redundancy through relationships. If one person has night vision and another has stored fuel and another has medical supplies, the group is more resilient than any individual. But trust is paramount. Loose lips don't just sink ships. They bring federal agents to your door. The receipt comes due. Let's go back to that man in Pennsylvania, the one who bought fertilizer, diesel, and aluminum powder. He's sitting in his living room, 2 federal agents across from him. They're polite. They're professional. They ask their questions. Why did you need these specific items? Are you part of any organizations? Do you hold anti-government views? He answers truthfully. He's building an engine. He's not part of any group. He votes, pays taxes, obeys the law. The agents take notes. They thank him for his cooperation. They leave. He thinks it's over. It's not over. He's in a database now. His name is flagged. The next time he makes a purchase that matches a pattern, any pattern, the investigation will be faster, more aggressive. He's a known subject. His rights haven't been violated, technically. He hasn't been charged with anything. But he's marked. And that mark follows him. This is happening to real people right now. Purchases that were legal and unremarkable yesterday trigger investigations today. The system is automated. Algorithms watch transaction data. Patterns are flagged. Fusion centers coordinate between federal, state, and local agencies. The surveillance net is tightening, and most people don't realize they're in it until agents knock on their door. The broader trajectory is clear. These 7 items are tracked or restricted now. Next year, more items will be added to the list. Communication devices, water filtration systems, tools that enable decentralized manufacturing, medical diagnostic equipment, anything that reduces dependence on centralized systems. The list expands, the noose tightens. Eventually, everything that enables independence becomes illegal, and at that point, you're either dependent or you're a criminal. The choice is in front of you now. Acquire what you need before the window closes completely, or wait and face a future where your only options are compliance or helplessness. The regulations are already in motion. The infrastructure is being built. The precedents are being set. Time is the asset you're running out of, and it's the one you can't stockpile. These 7 items aren't being banned to protect you. If that were the goal, the restrictions would target actual threats, not preparedness. Body armor doesn't cause crime, it prevents death. Food storage doesn't cause hoarding, it prevents starvation. Antibiotics don't cause resistance in meaningful amounts from preppers, they save lives. The official rationales are pretexts. The restrictions aren't about your safety, they're about the state's security. They're banning these items to protect themselves from you, because a population that can see in the dark, survive gunfire, treat disease, store energy, avoid surveillance, feed itself, and preserve wealth outside the system is a population that doesn't need permission to exist. And a population that doesn't need permission is a population that can say no. That's the capability they're eliminating. The capability to refuse. The receipt is coming due. Not for what you've bought, for what you haven't. When the power goes out and you're in the dark, when the bullets fly and you're unprotected, when infection sets in and you have no medicine, when gas stations are empty and you're immobile, when drones watch and you can't hide, when you're hungry and the only food requires compliance, when your currency is worthless and you have no alternative, that's when the receipt comes due. And the cost is your freedom, your autonomy, and maybe your life. The window is closing. You've been warned.